Thank you all for agreeing to have this little discussion with us. And we've been talking here today in New Hampshire about the community of practice, the structure of the community of practice, the values that guide this community of practice. And the three of you have been relatively new to the community of practice. I'm saying relatively because you've been involved in some important work recently, but you know, you haven't had that, you haven't been with the community of practice over the time of its development. So I really want to talk to you about a graphic that we put together that describes the commitment to work in a community of practice. And because you know, we talk on the bottom of this graphic, you see, we're talking about the issues that might help people to think about adopting a community of practice strategy. At the top of that graphic are the principles and the ways of behaving that we describe as being the behavior in a community of practice. So what I'd like you to talk about is that top part. Because as individuals that are relatively new to this, you must have observed some of this, okay? Or you must have heard people talk about some of these values of the community of practice. And, you know, I'm wondering, how did that lead you to think this would be a good thing for me to get involved in, okay? So take a look at that, and, you know, if somebody wants to start, that would be great. Okay, sure.
I was asked to participate by one of the original participants, and in part as a children's mental health director, the importance of having mental health represented and working with schools more collaboratively was really part of the piece that brought me here. What has kept me here is the continuation of discussing the issues, and whatever the issues are, about working more collaboratively within the schools, because the kids really do spend 8 hours a day in school, and sometimes more in school than at home. And so understanding and better understanding what mental health looks like, not just the kind of bad behaviors we talked about, but what it really looks like. And I think this organization is committed to doing that, and have talked about a number of different topics over the past year. And I think with Ian's work more recently, it's really, I think, going to enlighten how others understand children and children's behaviors, and how families, and I think that's the other piece, is understanding how the family organizations continue to work with all the organizations as part of a whole.
Others?
Yeah, the notion of working this way as the community of practice is laid out may be somewhat daunting when you first come as a newbie, as a new person joining as a partner around the table. But when you come, you recognize that the way of doing this work in terms of all partners having equal opportunity to contribute to shaping the agenda, to enjoying the conversation, participating in it in a dialogue format, is a very supportive way for enjoying conversation, for engaging in conversation, but it also can be very action-oriented. And I think that's where people recognize that they're putting limited time that they have with colleagues who are coming from many different perspectives. You need as much perspective from everybody's conversation out in the room, in the conversation, and that can drive to action and deliverables for the work that you want to get accomplished together. And so it makes for a very effective way to work together, and it's noticeable when you come new to that process.
You know, I must admit, when I first came into the group, I saw it as more of a one-sided relationship, in the sense that I needed the group. I needed the group to give me feedback, to give me information. I needed a crash course on children's behavioral health, because I was coming in as a documentarian who, you know, have done a lot of stories in my life that had never focused on this issue specifically. So I felt very welcome by the group, and there was some excitement, I think, about the work I was doing, but I didn't know that it would become as symbiotic as it has become, and as mutually beneficial. And I think now that I've been with the group for about a year, and we've been able to do a lot of planning together and actually have action items around grant proposals, around film screenings, around event planning. I feel much more engaged in the group, and I feel much more like a full member now, that I feel like as much as I've gotten from the group, which is tremendous, I think I'm starting to give back to the group. And that, I don't think you really truly feel a sense of membership in any group until you have that symbiotic relationship.
So I'd like to ask you, this is just great insights in terms of what you've noticed coming in. And I'd like you to comment on one of the things that we say about communities of practice, because a lot of individuals, they see this as, you know, somewhat soft, a little squishy, you know, how do you get to outcomes here? And one of the things that we assert is that their relationships is really what starts you on the road to outcomes. And so can you just comment on that a little bit? Do you believe that? And how does community practice help that happen?
I'm jumping, since I'm thinking off the top of my head that New Hampshire's a pretty small state, and what I've found throughout my professional career in journalism and now filmmaking is if you can connect with a fairly small but influential and interesting group of people, you can affect the state in a significant way. And this group, I think geographically, in terms of professional areas, in terms of interest areas, spans a great portion of the state. So without the relationships in this room, there's no way that my work, or probably many of the work of people in this room, would have the same impact without using this as an outreach mechanism.
Others?
Yeah, I think that we often, often when starting something or creating something new feels that you have to create a new table to bring people around. And it doesn't necessarily prove to be a very effective strategy. That the beauty, and as Dan said, the beauty of the small state of New Hampshire is recognizing that there are highly effective organizations or even more informal structures that are operating that bring across the range and roles that people are working on an issue to the same table. And that is really a much more effective way to go, which is to go out and plug into, become a part of those organizations. And the community of practice structure is one that reinforces. So I think very true, from the work that we're doing, trying to look at strategic planning around children's behavioral health, coming to the community of practice and relying on the insights, the leadership, the experience, and that the way that the structure allows people to really engage and share their information makes for a much more effective way to work. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
I would just say the same for what Dan and Jen have said. Participating in other organizations and coming into this room with familiar faces brings everything together, brings all those spokes of the wheel together, because again, when you work with, in this case, with children, they belong to a number of different cultural pieces and social pieces, and I think this really pulls all of those pieces together quite well.
I'd say one thing, I mean, the work that people in this room do, even more than me, in terms of direct service work in the schools, working with kids, is really hard work. And it's exhausting work, and it can be very frustrating. You hit so many bureaucratic obstacles and logistical obstacles. So I think to be in a space where there's a lot of shared values, where there's a lot of shared energy and a sense of commitment and mission, I think gives a lot of energy to each person in the group. I know it's given energy to me, even though I'm not on the ground doing the work every day in schools. I'm trying to more capture it from above.
There's something, I just want to tap onto that idea of leadership that you were talking about, because I think the evidence, as initiatives across our state, for example, are being evaluated, especially relative to advocacy and some of the things that have been harder to evaluate the efficacy of things, and I think that's really true around advocacy. What often rises to the top is that role of leadership. And so you would think that this structure doesn't necessarily focus on leadership of individuals because it's a shared leadership model. And in fact, what that probably is about is raising the leadership bar of everyone involved. And the importance of that is that what those evaluations are showing, what the data show, are that in fact, program success, initiative success hinges on those leaders. And so it's possible that the COP model is, sort of, again, raising that bar of leadership across all sections of types of people who are coming to an issue to discuss it and lead on it. So that's kind of a cool concept.